Welcome to Simulator Review, helping you find quality flight simulation with the world's most comprehensive listings and reviews of simulators. A warm welcome to our podcast for the flight simulation community. My name is Alexis, and in this episode I'm joined by my colleague from simulatorreview.com, Elliott.
Hi there.
Welcome back to all our regular listeners. If you are new to our podcast, then we are pleased you found us. You're in the right place for the top podcast on simulator venues and getting the most from your simulator experiences. We hope you do stick around, and we do recommend episodes 1 and 2 for a great introduction to us and our website, simulatorreview.com. This episode will be looking at an update to one of our existing Bluepin featured reviews for a simulator which we have visited in person. We originally went to Simulator Adventures in Manchester back in 2019, but since then they've now added full motion to their A320 simulator, so we went back again a few months ago to take a look and update our review. We will also have a special guest on to chat about it as well, so keep listening to find out who it is. Before we get to Simulator Adventures though, it's time for our regular Simulator News update where we cover news both at simulatorreview.com and in the wider simulator community. And for this we go over to Elliott. So Elliott, what have you got for us for the Sim News this week?
Thanks, Alexis. I thought we'd have a look at some venues starting to reopen. So we've had a plan of how any restrictions we're currently under are being eased. And noticed on social media that some good offers and notifications from some venues saying they're starting to open up. You thought you'd have an investigate into this, didn't you, Alexis?
Yes, certainly with the reopening of a lot of the venues in the UK now as we come out of the restrictions, there are some really good deals out there. Some are up to about 50 or 60% off the normal price, so really good to buy some vouchers if you can. There is some confusion out there about what dates they're allowed to open though. There are a couple of dates you can open in the UK, one in mid-April and one in mid-May, and I think venues have tried to get clarification about which categories they fit into, whether it's indoor leisure or indoor entertainment, and depending on which one it is, then follows through to what date they can open. So venues are trying to get clarification on that from the authorities. Some have been told categorically it's the April date, some have been told categorically it's the May date. So I think certainly it's difficult for the venues because it's difficult to know which is the correct answer.
Yeah, so that's a good amount of discount, 50 to 60% off. And we're all about encouraging and supporting these venues in our database. But who is the authority then on the simulator? Who decides what classification there are and giving them guidance?
So I think basically there's been guidance that's come out from central government, but none of that guidance really talks specifically about flight simulator venues, if you like. The venues I've spoken to, some of them have spoken to the likes of the local councils or Public Health England or even their insurers to really get a view from them about what date applies to them. But the problem is, depending on what local area you're in, you're talking to different councils or public health bodies. Clearly, venues in different areas seem to be getting different answers, unfortunately, and this is what's causing the confusion. Some have advertised that they're going to be opening in April, mid-April. Some have advertised that they've been told categorically they can't, and they have to wait till mid-May. And it really comes down to how they're being viewed, whether they're being viewed as indoor leisure or indoor entertainment.
And I suppose the other category that could apply is those more realistic simulators and more institutionalized venues that offer training, perhaps have got a different answer to those as well. So, yes, very much a muddled situation, and we feel for the chaps and chapesses in that position.
Absolutely, yeah.
And moving on to something slightly more cheery, finally bumped ourselves up to grade 5 on Infinite Flight, haven't we, Alexis? It's been a bit of a campaign.
Yes, I think my campaign's lasted longer than yours. I've been on Infinite Flight for several years now. This is the first time I've got up to grade 5, which is the kind of top grade they have on there. And it's all based on you meeting certain criteria in terms of number of hours flying and number of landings within a certain period of time and not having too many violations you've also, in a very short period of time, come from starting out at grade 1 all the way up to grade 5.
Yeah, it was a zero to hero mission, this. So we really like Infinite Flight. It's a great simulator on the iPad, and it just means that you don't have to buy all the infrastructure and invest in such machinery to have a desktop home flight simulator. Very convenient just to have in front of you. So while flying at work has been lacking, it's been something I've been partaking in, and it's been a bit of a campaign to get to there. And it's involved 395 landings in 90 days, 380 hours in 90 days, and total flight time of 515 hours and 1 minute, and 801 landings. So yeah, that's been a bit of a mission, but we finally got there, and we celebrated with a heritage flight in a DC-10. So yeah, fantastic app. And if you hadn't had a look at it yet, make sure you do check it out.
So you've been flying more than your CAA allowance would permit you in that time, is that right?
Yeah, I think there'd be a mutiny in the airline pilot world in any country if they were forced to do that sort of hours in such a short period of time.
Have there been any highlights in terms of places you've been to or aircraft you've flown over the last 90 days or so?
I think the key was just to mix it up as much as you can. So a little bit of bog standard route flying. It's quite fun to set one off in the evening and wake up in the morning just in time to land. Or you and I, we've visited a few of the trickier places, and those of you who follow us on social media would have seen that on Twitter.
Yeah, we've posted a few of those on Twitter. I think places like Quito and where else did we?
We've been to Lukla in Nepal, a short flight from Kathmandu, and then some in and outs. St. Bart's. Yeah, there's been a few places. We've got Telluride on the list somewhere.
Absolutely. I think we should, certainly a few more we should do together as a team.
Yeah, if there's any suggestions, let us know on our social media platforms or drop a comment.
Great. So well done, Elliot, on that achievement. So look forward to the sim news in the next podcast. In this episode, the main topic of discussion is one of our Blue Pin featured reviews, and it's Simulator Adventures in Manchester in the UK. The featured reviews are our top category where we've been to the venue and done a thorough in-person review to really bring you all the detail about what the venue offers and what the simulator is really like. We actually talked about this venue in podcast 4, which came out in July last year. However, since we originally visited back in 2019, they've updated their simulator and added full motion to the A320 they have. We went along recently to take a look and update our review. We've added our update to the online review on our site, and we wanted to update you on what we found in this podcast. We also have a special guest on from Simulator Adventures to talk about their simulator and the full motion system they've now added. But first of all, Elliot and I went to this simulator venue for our update a few months ago, so I'll be asking Elliot what we found and what he thought about it. So, Elliot, firstly, we said it was a hugely impressive simulator, which we really rated highly. So what are the new features they've added, and do you think it keeps that rating with us?
Yeah, it was a brilliant simulator that we visited back in beginning of last year. And when we visited, the full motion system was present. It was a different type of full motion system they had, but it wasn't actually working for us. So we did get to have a short flight. I think we did down to Birmingham from Manchester or something like that. And it was a very good Airbus flight deck, but it was sort of stationary and static for us. So we were very keen to go and try the full motion now that was up and running. And that really didn't disappoint. It had quite a large range, the motion. It was a very realistic feel. We had a bit of turbulence, a little bump on your landing, Alexis. I'll add that one in. And also the banking. It just felt very realistic, and especially if I'm comparing it to the simulators at work.
Yeah, so I flew the simulator with the full motion, and I was very impressed. And I've flown the full motion simulators elsewhere before. And we talked about fixed base and full motion simulators before. We've got an article on our website, and we talked about it in podcast 7. And the things we said that we felt were the real advantage were that you had a really good feeling of what the aircraft was doing when you were banking and pitching and rolling and all the rest of it. And also the one thing I said was you did get a very clear sense of how good or bad your landings were. So a lot of the simulator software you can get these days, you can get add-ins which shows your landing rate, but it doesn't. On a fixed base, normally you don't really get any sense of how good or bad the landing was. On full motion, and the one that Simulator Adventures have, it was very clear. And I don't think they were too bad, but certainly some room for improvement, I think.
Yeah, something else mentioning about the full motion as well was just how impressive it looks. So if you have a look at our walkthrough video, and we'll talk about the videos a bit more in a minute, you come out through the door, look left, and you're presented with this huge box on a electric platform. And it's just an impressive sight to be sitting there. And what's even better is the stairs move forwards and backwards up to this simulator, which is just really, really cool to see. You probably won't see that when you're inside the simulator, but for anyone outside watching, it's fantastic.
And I think you mentioned in the review that they've also got some new airplane seats as well in the reception area.
Yeah, these were brilliant. So again, head over to the site and have a look at the multimedia that we've put on there. I'm sure Alan will correct me later if I have this wrong, but they're from a Far East airline, from an Airbus A320 business class seats. They're a fantastic colour. I'd like some in my home here. My office here is a matching sort of green. And they look really good, really comfy, and it was quite a nice environment to sit in while we were having a chat. And I can imagine if you're waiting to go into the simulator there, add to the realism and the feel of what you're about to do. So they were in there as well.
Great. So what things are they talking about doing or looking to do now they've got full motion? I think there was mention that Simulator Adventures are looking to do virtual type ratings, and that may be something that's coming soon.
Yeah, again, we spoke with Alan there, and he was telling us that they're looking to get some official certification from the CAA. And what that'll mean is they can actually conduct MCC and JOC training in these simulators, and it's certainly up to it from what we saw. But also a shortened virtual type rating course. So I think the hours that were mentioned were a 10-hour course. So this is where a novice can come in, be taught by an ex-Airbus A320 pilot actually how the aeroplane flies, and then take it a few steps from the classroom into the simulator and put what they've learned into practice. We really like these virtual type ratings, don't we? Because everything about simulator review is realism and trying to find the best venues and sort of really encouraging development. And these virtual type ratings are great. So as somebody who's been and done a few sims, and they've moved from the novice, they've tried a few advanced things, and they really want to take their simulation to a new level of realism, a virtual type rating is certainly the way to go.
And we've actually talked about this recently in, I think, episode 19, when we were talking about preparing for a simulator session as an advanced user. And I think it was Andrew who was asking, are there things out there where you can get all this information and knowledge and put these things together so you can get your basic knowledge of how systems work and how instruments work and how to program the aircraft and how to plan a route and how to... These things, like virtual type ratings, are structured courses which will effectively get you to that point.
Yeah, and to add to that, in Simulator Adventures, Arsenal is an ex-A320 pilot. So you're going to go and learn from a chap who's actually done it, knows the aircraft inside out, and then you're going to progress into a full motion simulator. I just can't think of a more realistic experience for somebody who's serious about simulation.
Certainly sounds like some really good improvements there. And in your opinion, Elliot, do you think they still maintain their gold standard rating with us?
Yeah, I'll make no secret of it. Pretty much everyone who's listened to the podcast knows that this is one of my favourite simulators in the country. We always have that acid test, don't we? Would we spend our own money heading to this simulator? If I couldn't take people in the simulator at work, this is certainly where I'd be taking my friends and family up on an overnight up to Manchester. It's in a great location, and it's just a fantastic sim. It's so realistic, and it gives a really good all-round experience. So our revisit has certainly reaffirmed this top standard that we've got, and it'll be really hard for another simulator to top this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I can certainly confirm that I have spent my own money, and hopefully arranging a visit at some point when I can. It is a really good simulator, and I think it's one of the best certainly we've seen. So Thanks for the roundup there, Elliot, from our update visit. And we're very pleased to welcome Alan, who is one of the owners of Simulator Adventures, to our podcast. So firstly, I want to welcome Alan to the podcast today, and great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's a real privilege to be asked onto your podcast. It's not often. In fact, this is the first podcast I've ever been on. So, yeah, it's a first for me.
Wonderful. So I think it's a real privilege for us to have you on as well. This is something we want to do, which is really talk to owners, not only when we visit, but also have people on our podcast to talk about the venues that they've built and invested in. So I wondered if you could just introduce yourself briefly and tell us a little bit about your background in aviation, Alan.
Yeah, so my name's Alan Russell. I'm one of the founders, along with my twin brother, Stuart. We founded Simulator Adventures. And our background in flying started quite some time ago. We were both about to leave school, didn't really know what we wanted to do. But as kids, everybody's got an idea, roughly you've got some idea what you want to do. It's the usual things, train driver, pilot, astronaut, whatever. But, we were both interested to a certain extent in aviation. And it wasn't until the RAF came along to the school, did a little roadshow, and I think 6 weeks later, both myself and my brother were in. We were training as flight simulator technicians, and we both then went on to retrain in different roles. I went on to fly as an air electronics operator on Nimrod, so I was operating the air radar and communication systems. And my brother went off and he retrained as a engineering officer. And ultimately, we both ended up retraining as pilots. I started flying commercially in the North Sea on helicopters, as did my brother. I was on the Sikorsky S-61. He was on the Super Puma. And then I went on to fly with Air Tours, then My Travel, and most recently Thomas Cook. And my brother stayed on helicopters and flew search and rescue for one of the big oil companies. That's pretty much how we got into flying.
Found it interesting. I didn't realise you guys did the North Sea. I mean, that's hardcore flying. That's really hard.
Yeah, I think my first line trip, I got in the sea with this guy. It was rotors running. I'd never met the guy before. Sat in. He introduced himself. And the very first thing he said to me was, if you've got your head screwed on, you'll be out of this in 6 years flying jets.
Yeah, good advice. I think that's
and 6
that's
years
hard.
later, I was out there. I was out of flying jets, yeah.
Good on you. Well done.
I wanted to ask really, Alan, what made you make that transition from being a commercial pilot into setting up a simulator venue, which you now have?
Well, first of all, I didn't really have any intention of building a sim. It was after I had some medical issues in 2015. I had a TIA, or what's commonly known as a mini stroke, and sort of naively I thought I could go back flying. The symptoms I had were pretty benign, didn't really affect me very much at all. I recovered very quickly, and I thought I'd go back flying, but ultimately the Civil Aviation Authority decided that it's a permanent withdrawal of your medical when this happens. And my brother also had some medical problems, and he no longer flies. So one night we were just having a beer, just having a chat, and we thought, well, it sort of makes sense. We're both flight sim technicians. We both have a lot of flying experience. Let's build a sim. At least by doing that, we can sort of go back flying. We can use all our knowledge and experience to build it and to operate it, and perhaps let other people off the street experience what it's like to actually fly a passenger airliner.
And you've set up now and running a very high standard A320 simulator, and as we've mentioned, it's one of the ones that we would rate as a gold standard one in our directory. You've now taken the step to add in the full motion and get that working. What were the reasons for that? Because not many venues have actually chosen to add the full motion. I think most in our directory are fixed base simulators.
When we first started looking at it, we could see that there were quite a number of fixed base sims around the UK. Although interestingly at the time, there were no simulators actually in Manchester. There were some outside the Greater Manchester area. but there wasn't one actually in the city itself. And the majority of sims were 737s, not many A320s, and almost all of them were fixed, as you guys know, almost all of them are fixed base. We sort of agonized over this, and we realized that, simulators could start popping up everywhere, really, as the sort of technology becomes more available to people. And we wanted to sort of future-proof ourselves and just set ourselves apart from other operators just by having something that was slightly different. So that was the reason we decided to add the motion system. We initially started thinking about a 3-axis, but as we got more drunk, we decided to add 6-axis. So in reality, we just went with our gut feeling that really, if we're going to do 3-axis, why not just try 6? And so that's what we did.
And what kind of challenges did you face implementing the full motion?
It's a difficult thing to do. We nearly didn't do it. Adding a motion system does complicate things a lot. It's tricky enough building a decent simulator, but when you build a fixed base sim, it doesn't really matter where components are. They can sit on the floor. They don't have to be bolted down. You can run wires wherever you want. As long as it's all sort of hidden behind the cockpit frame, cockpit structure, it's okay. And the cockpit structure doesn't have to be really very substantial at all. But as soon as you add motion, lots of restrictions come into play. The main one being, first of all, your footprint that you can mount things on is much reduced. The structure has to be really rigid. All the components have to be bolted down as if it was an actual airplane. The projection system, as you can imagine, these projectors, if you just move a projector by 1 millimeter, you will see over distance, you will see a significant movement on the visual system. So everything has to be absolutely bolted down. It has to be rigid. The interface between the actuators and the sim itself has to be professionally designed, simulated, stress tested, professionally manufactured, and that adds significant cost to the simulator. And all that aside, the cost of 6-axis motion is really expensive. It's complicated and costs a lot of money. So we didn't take the decision lightly, but it was a challenge for us. We wanted to try to show that actually you could build a simulator that was pretty close to the experience you would have in a level D sim, but you wouldn't have to spend millions of pounds. Normally 6-axis sims are the remit of the big manufacturers, and that build multi-million pound sims. But we wanted to show that being a bit creative, being careful where you source your parts from. For us personally, we bought parts from all around the world, and we've shown that you can actually build a really good simulator, similar experience to level D, but without the multi-million pound price tag. And
now you've got it up and running. How has it gone? What kind of reactions have you got from the customers? And do you think that all that pain and effort has been worthwhile, or do you regret the drunken conversation where you settled on doing a 6-axis full motion simulator?
Well, I'd be lying if I said there weren't hurdles on the way. We had some major problems. We're now on our second motion system. The first one that was designed didn't really work very well. We'd made some sort of calculation errors, and so it became an extremely expensive stand, which is, I think, what you saw when you came up to visit on the first occasion. That's why it wasn't operating. We had some issues with it, so we're now on our second platform. So we completely removed the original one. We lifted the sim off, removed the original one, and we refitted it with a much larger, more capable platform. But apart from that, we had a few teething problems with it, but it has gone really well. But it's a learning experience. 6-axis motion is something we hadn't worked on in the past. We'd worked on 3-axis motion systems. So it was new to us. It was new to the manufacturer of the motion platform as well. And so it's been a very steady learning process from start until now. From a customer point of view, if you've got a good fixed base sim, you will get great reviews for your sim. You know, it doesn't need to have motion, but what our customers have all said is that, you know, despite having had a great time first time round, when they've come back and flown on motion, they said they wouldn't go back to a fixed base sim. It's something that as a pilot and an ex-flight sim tech, that it sort of niggles at you that it's not quite finished, if that makes sense. You know, you get most of the experience as you would in a fixed base sim, but the motion just completes the simulation. It really does. And as was mentioned earlier, you know, you everything from the thrust on takeoff, the initial rotation, all the maneuvering, the rolling, to the approach, the touchdown, and the braking at the end. It really does make it feel like that you're in a real airplane, and that's the beauty of 6-axis. You only get those cues, all of the cues, if you have a 6-axis motion system. If you have anything less than 6-axis, you're starting to drop some of the sensations, either, you know, heave, surge, sway, yaw. All these ones are pretty much the remit of 6-axis motion systems. So yeah, the customers love it. The ones that haven't been back yet are now aware of the fact that it's now on motion, and we've had a lot of rebookings since that message has got out there now. So we'll be looking forward to bringing these customers back through as soon as the restrictions get lifted and we can carry on.
And we're actually aware of real Airbus A320 pilots that have come up and flown with you, Alan. Hannah, one of our team members, has been up and brought her dad as well and came back with very positive reports. Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
I think some of the best simulator venues we've seen, we're always looking to see what they're looking to improve and add in, and what kind of things have you got coming up that you could talk about? And also, if I can ask as well, we also talked about virtual type rating, which you're introducing, so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that as well for us.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we were lacking in the sim was control loading systems, or control loading system for the rudder pedals. So, you know, for people off the street who want to come and fly, you don't really need the control loading. It's nice to have it, but we do, or we have had a significant number of pilots come through now, and as an ex-Airbus pilot myself, again, one of the niggles from my point of view was not having control loading on the pedals. So, you know, increasing airspeed, increasing load on the pedals, for instance, or if you have an engine failure, you want to be able to trim the rudder and get the rudder pedals to move into position. So this is missing at the minute. But we are working on a modification for that now. So hopefully in 2 months or thereabouts, we should have a system running, and we'll be testing it on the sim. So that's really the main thing from a technical point of view. We've also got some new pilot seats coming. Our replica ones weren't really representative of Airbus seats, but the new ones are much more representative. They are electrically driven into position. They have the Airbus armrest system. So again, this is really for pilots, commercial pilots, or in particular Airbus pilots who want to come and use the simulator to prepare for their twice yearly sim checks. So these are sort of really improvements aimed at for pilots, but again, it adds to the overall improvement to the sim and the overall realism compared to the actual airplane. From a sort of experience point of view, for enthusiasts, we're looking to add VATSIM, which I think is potentially a great addition. So you can fly a full flight from start, pushback, taxi, takeoff, cruise, descent, approach, and landing using all the relevant VATSIM sectors. And I think for guys that are really quite advanced, this would really just complete the simulation for them.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to add. Certainly from my point of view, it's something I've used a lot on fixed base sims with VATSIM. It's something we always ask about, I think, when we go and visit venues. with your virtual type rating that's coming up as well, that's going to incorporate that as well, I presume?
Yeah, so the virtual type rating, originally we didn't plan to do it, but we've had a few inquiries from people who are interested, and so we did a bit of research, had a look around the country to see what was on offer, and we sort of struggled to find virtual type ratings that were clearly defined, let's say, that had consistent feedback about the quality of it or the quality of the courses. So we've spent a bit of time looking at how we can create something that's much more aligned with what you would experience with an airline-driven type rating. As the name suggests, virtual type rating is not full type rating. It's a pared down version, but it covers all the key elements that you would need to ultimately operate the aircraft competently. But short of emergencies, most of the stuff you would cover is pretty similar to what you cover in the basic sort of initial type rating that you would do. So from our point of view, we wanted to align our virtual type rating with what we would do typically in an airline. So we've decided to take an integrative approach. So that way it aligns itself more with what airlines do. So each lesson is actually a full flight profile where subject areas are introduced each time you do a session, but you build on the previous session's experience. And so you will end up doing initially things like cockpit prep, and then the rest of the session will be covering other elements would be demonstrated by the instructor. And then in the second session, you would be adding maybe programming the flight management computer, then on to pushback, taxi, takeoff and climb, and things like autopilot use, navigation, and then you'd probably end up going into approach phases like instrument landing systems or instrument landing system approaches, non-precision approaches, and then more advanced maneuvers like go-arounds, engine failures, use of the QRH. And then finally, you would end up doing a mini flight test. So really, it's 10 hours of flying, I think is what we're looking at. So 10 separate lessons. And then finally, a small flight test at the end, just to tie everything together.
That really sounds fantastic, and I suppose it gets somebody to the point where they can competently do a whole flight, manage that themselves, do a flight plan fuel, all that kind of stuff, fly the flight with another person, and deal with kind of most things that you would normally get, different kinds of approaches, all that kind of stuff. So that sounds fantastic. Elliot, you mentioned earlier that we've got some new multimedia we've added, and I think Simulator Adventures is one of the venues we've kind of pioneered this on. Did you want to just briefly describe what we've got on now for Simulator Adventures, which is on our YouTube channel and also added into the review we've got on our website?
Yeah, it was great. It was very kind of Alan to invite us back up to come and see the changes he's made. So we thought we'd take that opportunity, being it's one of our favourite simulators, to add some new multimedia. So as it stood, a blue pin review had lots of photos that you would be snapping away on a review, Alexis, and it was just a very sort of static view and picture of the venue. We wondered how can we add to the realism of choosing a venue, and how can we give somebody a more informed choice. So what better than to offer a walkthrough, a little bit of cockpit cam, and also a quick 3-question interview with the owners or the managers. So we've trialled this with 2 venues, and one of them is Simulator Adventures. So if you head over to their page on our website, or also look on our social media or YouTube, and you'll find a short promo video, a feature-length video, a walkthrough of the venue, and also a few questions with the owners. And hopefully that just gives a more rounded picture of the venue and helps you make a decision to go and visit.
Great, sounds like some really interesting stuff, and that will be rolled out to existing venues we've been to and new venues we go and review as well. So really looking forward to seeing more of that. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today, Alan. It's been a real pleasure, and we found it very interesting, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So thank you very much.
No, that's great, Luke. Thanks again, guys. It was a great opportunity to be invited onto your podcast.
You can book a session at Simulator Adventures via their website, www.simulatoradventures.com. There are links on the review that we've got on our site, and if you do go and visit them, do remember to mention us as well. We are keen not only to keep doing more Bluepin featured reviews, but also go back and do updates when a venue has added something new and talk about it in our podcast. So it's really good to do this today, and great to have Alan on. So do keep an eye out for those updates in the future. So there you go, a chat about Simulator Adventures in Manchester in the UK and their A320 simulator, which is now full motion. Do have a look at the review on our site as well. There are some photos that we took when Elliot and I revisited a few months ago, and also some great videos of the venue as well, so you can really see what it is like. If you've been to Simulator Adventures, and especially if you've been recently to try out the new full motion, let us know what you think. You can add comments to the review on our site at simulatorreview.com. We would love to hear what you thought and whether you enjoyed your experience. Also, if there are other simulator venues you're interested in us reviewing, do let us know. Join us again in 2 weeks' time, where we will have another episode of the podcast discussing all things Flight Simulator. In the meantime, subscribe to our podcast on the podcast services of your choice. We're available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and quite a few others, so whichever one you use, you should be able to find us. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a star rating and review. Any 5-star reviews will be read out on the podcast, and we really appreciate your feedback and support. Until next episode, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Elliot.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Simulator Review podcast. We would love your feedback, so please do comment and rate us. Please follow, share, like and subscribe on all our social media channels, where you can see regular updates on new simulator listings and reviews, as well as our latest articles. Until next time, happy simming.